This is VEDN Day 15, and today I want to talk about a video game that I was playing that I finished called SUZERAIN. And this is an interesting game. So it's a political simulator, and so you play as a president of a fictional country called Swordland in a whole world full of fictional countries. And so it's not the same world as our world, yet it does take place in the 1950s. So it has the same kind of timeline as our world, same kind of cultural elements as our world, same sort of political situations and ideologies as our world in the 1950s. And that's an interesting way to do it, and I think that was a great idea, because the 1950s is a time when the world was adjusting after a period during the early 20th century where you had all of these kind of big shakeups and disillusions and new countries being formed and empires getting toppled and monarchies getting overthrown and new radical political ideologies coming on the scene. And the 1950s is where things started settling into this sort of first world, second world, third world, Cold War paradigm that it was for the next 40 years or so. And so it's a great setting to put a game like this, where you have to be the president of a very troubled nation. A nation that is dealing with a horrible economic recession, political instability, cultural issues, what do you call it? A separatist movement, lots of political radicalism, just a lot of stuff is wrong with the country. And so it's a great time to set it in, because you have a lot of recent history of revolutions and wars. But what's great is that because it is a fictional world, it doesn't kind of bias the setting at all. So obviously there is an analog to the United States, which is the capitalist superpower, and then there's an analog to the USSR, United Kantana, I think it's called. That's the communist superpower. Then there's a third, I guess you could call a superpower, which is a kind of an old-fashioned monarchy called Rumburg, and that's a neighboring country to Swordland. And then there's a bunch of other countries that you know, we're in an area that kind of is meant to resemble Europe, but there's other countries that more resemble Asia and Africa and stuff like that. But there's nothing is one-to-one, and the situations, the political situations in the different countries are not directly analogous to other countries, and that's I think important, because it's supposed to take you kind of out of any of the biases you inherit from the current world history and look at things a little bit more objectively. And you know, that kind of perspective, what's great about this game is perspective, and I'm all about perspective. There's a lot that's laudable about this game, and I'm going to be explaining this. So with the history of Swordland, the game starts out when you're born in 1908, and this is sort of on the cusp of a revolution. And so Swordland was a monarchy in the 1800s and early 20th century. And then right around the time you're born, there's a revolution where it becomes a republic. And it's headed by a guy named President Whiskey. And but then President Whiskey is then overthrown by what is termed a fascist leader. Luderin, I believe is his name. And then Luderin is at war with a communist revolutionary force that's also trying to take over the country. So there's a civil war for a long time between fascists and communists. And then it's finished off by a guy named Tarquin Sol, who is basically the great uniter. He comes in, he's this general, he comes in and does a military takeover of the whole country, gets rid of the fascist and communist governments, and creates a second republic. But this republic is quite a bit more authoritarian than the first one, and Saul becomes president for a long time after that. He gets several terms, and he's the leader of the United Swordland Party, which is this unity party. And as a unity party, we've seen like unity parties like that, like South Africa, Nelson Mandela's party is one of those. They kind of, it's weird because they kind of stand for unity and barely anything else. You know, maybe they have some principles, but they're kind of a blank slate in a way. And so Tarquin Sol's government emphasizes planned economy, strategy, and authoritarianism, and suppressing the separatist, the ethnic separatist force in the South, the Blutish uprising. And then there's an opposition leader who rises up within the party named Alfonso. It's Ewald Alfonso is his name. And he becomes the next president and beats Saul in the nomination. And he then makes it a more liberal country. He does a lot more free market reforms and stuff. And the economy tanks. And there's a great debate about whether the economy tanked because of Saulism, as it's called, like Solonomics, the planned economy stuff, or if it tanked because Ewald Alfonso's liberal reforms. There's a great disagreement about whether it was just a delayed recession from Solonomics or whether Ewald Alfonso was responsible. But then what happens is people get tired of Ewald Alfonso. They want someone new, and that's where you come in, President Anton Reign. And you can decide whatever Anton Reign's sort of vision for government is, because in this unity party, United Swordland Party, it's really kind of up in the air. Like, it's not, there's no set kind of values of this party. There's the conservative wing who adheres more to Saulism. There's the reformist wing that adheres more to Alfonso, Ewald Alfonso's plans. But then you're kind of a wild card. You come in and you could be anything you want. And so it's your job to decide that. And so then there's a nationalist party, the National Front Party, who are affiliated with the Young Swords, who were part of the whole Luderan fascist regime. And then there's the Peace, Freedom, and Justice Party, which is like sort of a green or libertarian socialist party. And they're like the leaders of the whole reform movement, and the kind of Alfonso reformists within the USP are sort of aligned with them on some things. And then there's a communist party, and those are the main political organizations. And so you can kind of buddy up or get chummy with any of the different factions that you want. But what's fascinating about this game, so you have this troubled history of this country. You come in, it's your job to somehow repair this country that's in a horrible, horrible recession, is dealing with political instability, memory of civil war and political repression. And you can do it any way you want. But anyway, any path you choose is going to have consequences. and you're gonna have to make enemies out of some people, and you're gonna have to make friends with other people. You're gonna have to make compromises. You're gonna have to sacrifice your principles sometimes. You're gonna have to make deals, grease palms. It's a game that really puts you in the role of being a president, as in this is what it's actually like to be a president. And so everything you do in the game is stuff that a president would actually do. You go to briefings, you get, you get reports from different members of your cabinet telling you information about their departments. You go to meetings. You go to like parties, events. You deliver speeches. You go home and spend time with your family, and you have to manage every relationship, and the personal is political and the political is personal, and you can't really win because there's always someone who's going to be mad at you, and you have to make tough choices. And not making a choice can sometimes be just as bad as making a choice. So it's a real, what it is it's an empathetic game, because it makes you become a politician and have to see, actually, this is kind of hard. This is not easy. And I think people, the way they talk about politicians, they make it seem like being a politician is just like, I don't know, a walk in the park. And it's always obvious to know what to do in any given situation. But there's a lot of problems. And the consequences of your actions can be severe. And so, the way I was playing the game, I was basically trying to be the great uniter. I was like unity first. And so I would let everyone have their say. I would try to bring everyone together. I'd be kind to everyone. But what happened was I tanked the economy. The economy was already bad. It just kind of stayed bad my whole presidency. Never really got better. And then we went to war with Rumberg, which I tried to avoid, but it's hard to avoid that in this game. You really have to be super pacifistic to avoid that war. And I trusted the advice of my Minister of Defense, who's named Josef Lancia. I trusted his advice all the way, because I thought this guy knows what he's doing, and apparently not, because Rumberg won the war and I died in prison in 1974 in Rumberg after spending a good, 16 years in a Rumberg prison. Died in prison. So yeah, did not work out very well for me. I tried to go more kind of planned economy, although I did have some, like, I privatized healthcare and stuff. I had to make some sacrifices, but it just wasn't enough. The debt was always a little bit high. I did what I could to lower the debt, but the problem is because you have to lower the debt in order to keep your currency valuable. Because I guess, yeah, like, the stored land currency isn't the most valuable currency in the world. It's not like the dollar, so you have less freedom there, and you have to keep it valuable by making sure that your debt is low, so that, other countries want to trade with your currency, or something like that. I don't know how economics works. But what that means is that you can't really invest a lot if you have to keep the debt low. So you have to be a little bit austere. But my problem was I kept wanting to invest because of Keynesianism, and I kept wanting to stimulate the economy with more investments. I kept wanting to like throw more money in developing agriculture, for instance. And The problem with that is that it meant I had to borrow a lot of money. And I had to tax a lot. I had to raise taxes. And when you raise the taxes too much, it stifles growth. And so I just put too many taxes on the public. And it just flatlined the economy. I was just getting no results. And I also made a pretty bad investment in the Gasom Corporation, which I found out that if I hadn't sold my shares in Gasom, I would have recovered and I would have had a bit of growth. But I foolishly sold my shares, got nothing out of that deal, wasted a bunch of money, didn't get any benefit from it. So yeah, I played it all wrong economically. I strategized horribly. And I strategized horribly militarily too. I did invest in the military heavily because I knew that that war was coming. And so, and I listened, I still think it was the right advice to listen to Joseph Lancia when it came to what investments to make in the military, because he wanted to, instead of increasing the numbers of the army, he wanted to increase the technology, and he said that that would put us ahead, whereas numbers, we can't compete with Rumberg's numbers anyway, so there's nothing we can do about that, but at least we can have better technology. So I listened to him there, and I think that was the right choice. But when it came to the actual war strategy, when it came down to the war, he dropped the ball completely. So yeah, it was a huge fumble. And that's what happens, you know. Sometimes you lose wars and then you end up dying in prison. But yeah, like, I played it like a reasonable person who also wanted to hold on to my authority. And so I made a point of trying to, when the constitutional reforms were happening, I made a point of trying to keep as many presidential powers as I could, while also having enough concession in there to please the reformists enough to actually get the thing through. Because I knew I wanted the reform package, because I felt like that would foster more national unity. If the reformists got something that they wanted, that would make them more likely not just to vote for me, but to just work with the party. But yeah, so I tried to keep as much authority within the presidential office as possible, just so that I would have as much power as I could to control whatever I needed to. And then I also I tried to please both the reformists and the nationalists. I tried to have a few, like, I was anti-immigration. That was something that I was trying to use that to please the nationalists. So I had, like, I was trying to really, like, make this a big old compromise. And yeah, I just strategized poorly and I failed. But there's a lot of ways you can play it. You can, you know, you can do full-on communist, full-on fascist, full-on libertarian. Somewhere in between. I kind of tried to be somewhere in between. But then you have to manage your family life too. And the family relationships sometimes bleed into the professional relationships. And so it's all, you gotta, like, really pay attention to the relationships that you're forming. And you'll get betrayed and all kinds of things happen. So I think it's a great game to kind of show what it's actually like to be a president. I think it's an important game. I think it's a very educative game, even though it isn't real. It's not the real world and real history. It's still very educational in that it shows the political process and shows how difficult it really is to get anything done and to do anything that you would like to do, and how many places your hands are tied, and how many people just aren't willing to appreciate what they've been given and are always looking for more. There's, you know, so many people in that game who are like, I'm disappointed in you, and then you're like, but this is the best I could do. You know? It really shows how much of a thankless job it is to be a politician in some ways. And I think that's important. I think I classify this as an important game, not just a good game. And the way it's played is cool because it's mostly done through text boxes. And it's mostly done through dialogue. And so what you respond to in the conversations, how you respond in the conversations, basically determines the course of your presidency. There are a few other things you do, like choose whether to sign bills, choose what presidential decrees to announce. And you can, there's like a couple other things that you can do, but it's mostly just dialogue. It's mostly just the things that you say in the dialogue determine the course of your presidency. And I like that because that's how it pretty much is in real life. So yeah, that's Suzerain. Great game, highly recommend it. Really more of a visual novel than a strategy game, but there's a lot of strategy in it. So really intelligent game. Play it. But that's VEDN Day 15. I'll see you tomorrow for VEDN Day 16.